Alrighty, hello everyone, and welcome to Opsera's DevOps Huddle number 17. We're so thankful that you could join us today. Today we're going to be discussing the top Salesforce DevOps challenges and how to solve them, both through strategy and with our tool at Opsera. So I'd like to invite my colleagues, Sarab and Ed, online here so we can get started. So Rob and Ed, how would you like to introduce yourselves? How about Ed, you go first. You're on the left there.
Sure. I'm Ed Slatt. I'm a sales engineer at Opsera. I've spent most of my career as a developer. In the last 5 years, I've been working a lot in the DevOps space. Nice to be here.
And Sarab.
Thank you, Anna. Hi, all. This is Sarab. I am the solutions engineer / architect here at Opsera, and I have over 20 years of experience in the industry. Thank you.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks, y'all. So, these guys are going to take you through some of the history and background about why we're at where we're at when it comes to Salesforce DevOps. We're going to take you down to the basics to explain why some of these challenges have come about. And then we're going to go into some more deeper level challenges that you probably all experience every day. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how Opsera helps with those challenges. And then at the end, we'll take your questions. So if you have questions throughout, go ahead and leave them in the chat. And if we don't get to them today, we'll definitely reach out afterwards and respond to them. So I'm going to hand it over to Sarab and Ed, and they're going to take you through the basics to get started.
Thank you, Anna, for the lovely introduction. And let's talk about how's everything with you, Ed, first. How's life today?
Wonderful. Very good. It's nice and pretty in Pennsylvania today. Thank you.
Nice. And today's discussion, we're going to talk about Salesforce, SDLC, and the importance of Opsera's DevOps platform. So are you ready, Ed?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. Let me ask you the first and very basic question. What is DevOps in Salesforce?
Okay, thank you for that. So we will get into some history here. Let's see. So much of Salesforce's power comes from being able to represent specific business processes, right? So years back, you'd have a company decides to go with Salesforce. Somebody was kind of in charge of that effort, and they would have to start setting things up, configuring it. Maybe they would put out some training, but they would kind of get the organization starting to use this tool. Pretty quickly, requests would come in for customization. Could I add a particular attribute to an object? Or could I get this user interface to have this drop-down list with these entries in it, right? Everybody's trying to make it more representative of what they actually do in the company. So that's great. That's the power. That's what Salesforce brings. But what happened is three things. One is the requests that came in started to get more complicated. Two, they started to come more frequently. And then three, you would start to scale up your Salesforce delivery team to meet that demand. So when those three things come together, things that are pretty simple, or I should say things with little complexity, start to compound in complexity. Right? It starts to become more problematic. Things that should be easier are less easy because you don't understand it. A particular developer doesn't understand everything that's happening with the other developers and the other requests for Salesforce. So that results in outages. Right now, things don't work all the time. And for instance, now your sales team goes to make a quote or do some basic functionality. It doesn't work. It breaks. It results in something that they can't use. And now, sales folks aren't quiet, right? They're starting to raise visibility. Why isn't this working? And that's a problem. So now we are the Salesforce delivery team. This is a problem. What are we going to do? So maybe we decide to spin up another Salesforce, a little pet Salesforce that we can test everything in. So we're going to go into there. We're going to make our changes in there. And then once we're very confident and we feel good about those changes in that test Salesforce, a completely other Salesforce, a little instance. Once we feel good about things working in there, then we will move it into prod. And Salesforce provides change sets to do that. This is the Salesforce native element that lets you export from one Salesforce and into a different one. And that sounds great. But what has happened now is you've introduced another element to the mix, and it's environments. So now you have this question of what's in this environment that's not in this one. How are these environments the same? And then it gets into why is my update not working there when it works here for me? right? So in my world, I come from SDLC. I was a developer for most of my career. In my world, that's kind of known as it works on my machine, right? Which is problematic. Luckily and fortunately, SDLC, or software development lifecycle, normal software delivery, development delivery, has solved this problem really, really well, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And those solutions can kind of be bundled and thought of as DevOps. So that brings the question up, how can we apply those lessons learned, those methodologies, those tools? How can we apply the benefits of all that history with these problems in SDLC? How can we bring that to Salesforce specifically? So that's what we're going to spend a lot of today about. There's the next piece then becomes, how do we do that? The way that we do that, one of the first things that you have to do is move into a source-driven development methodology. So in my opinion, the foundation of DevOps is Git. The ability to control text, your single source of truth in text in a Git repository unlocks all of this goodness.
Yeah.
So how do we
That's a
go
good
ahead?
point, Ed. So let me first summarize. You said a lot of good things here, right? So first is you are sharing that all the developers have been working in their independent environments, like sandbox in their dev environments, and then they have to push this code from that feature branch or sandbox to UAT to QA to dev, and then finally to production. And this code may or may not be in sync, and that could be a trouble. That's what you're saying. And then you're also saying that DevOps and SDLC and Salesforce DevOps, they're all correlated. You can use the same operating principles that you use in SDLC, and you can use them in Salesforce DevOps as well. Very similar to
Absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly right, Sarab. Thank you for that. So many of the challenges are the same. There is one kind of significant difference, and that's where historically the single source of truth for a Salesforce instance or an org is the org itself. So I make these changes in the org. If I want to know about the org, I look at the org, and that's where it's all at. That's a problem. That's kind of a blocker to using all the methodologies of DevOps. So what we need to do is to combat that blocker, we need to get the single source of truth, the SSOT. We need to move the SSOT from being the org itself to being in Git as text files, right? So how do we do that with Salesforce? And the answer is that that Salesforce provides mechanisms to get that out. You need a tool to be able to apply those mechanisms consistently.
Cool. Thank you. No, I totally get you that you're talking about continuous integration. You're talking about continuous integration with Salesforce DevOps, how we can use Jenkins or Salesforce DX and automate the whole process. I think that's where you're trying to go.
Exactly. So we need a mechanism to get the single source of truth into Git. And we want to use a tool to do that so we do it consistently. And then we want to apply that tool automatically and when it makes sense. So that's what we need to do. Once we can do those things, we can use all the methodologies and the lessons learned from normal SDLC DevOps. When I say, you asked originally, let me bring it back to the original question. When you ask what is Salesforce SDLC, to me, the idea is applying SDLC DevOps to Salesforce, given this base, which is the tool that gets you in and out of Git.
Cool. And that also brings me to another understanding that I have, and you can tell me more about it, is Salesforce development is like 10% or 15% in a big, huge organization. But there is also other engineers working on other features. That is the whole other org that is probably 70 to 75% that is working on SDLC piece, their own developing our own features, deploying it on Kubernetes or anywhere using Docker and building those images and publishing them all over as a development cycle. So that brings me to two things. Like, we can bring these two environments, have a common operating principle for SDLC and DevOps, and then we can use those important features that Opsera is also have built for both SDLC and Salesforce DevOps. So now my next question is, can you tell me a little bit about Salesforce specific development and what are the changes that have happened in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so when we talk about Salesforce, the progression of Salesforce development, and we talk about moving from change sets into source-driven methodology and development, one thing that hasn't really changed is how you do your actual Salesforce development, right? Sometimes you're in the user interface making these changes. Sometimes you're creating classes in your IDE. That really hasn't changed. What we're describing here, that's all stays the same. What we're describing is how we move that work around. So we're introducing environments to try to mitigate risk. How we move from one environment to another is what we're talking about here. And it makes all the difference for a lot of these challenges that are coming up.
Cool, good. So what I'm understanding is you're solving that multiple developers are working in their sandbox and they want to merge the code into UAT or prod, then they can use Opsera to automatically do that. Is that what you're trying to give us an understanding of its source code driven development?
Absolutely. And that's one of the biggest pieces is this idea of continuous integration, right? So as a developer, it's really easy and it's kind of comfortable and nice to go off and work with your head down and ignore everything else that's happening. I have a big bunch of work. I'm going to come over here where I control everything. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do my own testing. And I don't want to go up. I don't want to come out of my hole because it's going to hurt. I'm going to hit problems that are introduced by other people. I'm going to have to solve them. All of that I don't want to do. So I just want to sit here in my own little spot and work. That's the opposite of continuous integration, right? What that ends up doing is kicking the can down the road. By the way, I used to do it all the time. I think I had branches called like Ed's branch and things like that. You don't want to do that. You have a stream of these requests coming in. You want to tackle them in short-lived branches, and you want to get back into integration very quickly to minimize the pain that you're going to feel when you try to do so.
Yeah, that's a good understanding. I have a very similar experience as well. So what about versioning? So since you're moving your source code and using GitHub and Git, so are you able to version and deploy and then deploy to production?
Absolutely. So Git's the key here, right? In my opinion. So Git gives you that no kidding, absolute ground truth of your ancestry right there in the mechanism itself. So this is different from before Git or before version histories, even with change sets. If you're managing that yourself and you may have a very rigorous process, manual process, and I'm going to grab my change set, I'm going to put it in this directory and I'm going to apply this naming convention. All that's great, but it's nowhere near what you get just by using Git and doing and pushing commits.
Cool, good to know that. And then let me ask you, what are also the challenges that are presented with Salesforce DevOps?
So the challenges come from this idea of complex requirements coming in, a growing team, and having to release a lot, right? So there's where your challenges are going to come in. Your challenges are going to end up being collaboration, automation, dependencies, and rolling back. These are the 4 things that you're going to have to do well, and they're hard to do in that growing team if you're using change sets.
Good. That's great to know. Now, I want to break down, there's a lot of good things that you've said here. So let me break it down each point. First, let's talk about collaboration. Then we'll talk about automation, dependencies, and rollback, and how collaboration can help. Opsera can help in collaboration using DevOps and Salesforce DevOps.
Yeah, so collaborate. This is one of the major lessons learned from DevOps, from SDLC DevOps, right? And here comes agile development. Here comes the ceremonies involved with that. Understanding who's doing what work, short-lived branches and Git, branching strategies. All of those things enable collaboration. Without those things, you really have to understand so much about what's happening to get things to work, and you're very prone to outages.
Okay, good. So you're trying to bring home the idea of when developers are developing and they're posting or pushing their feature requests to a UAT or a production branch, and then they're using the whole idea of moving into source-driven development as well and collaboration.
Exactly. As soon as you have a branching strategy and you have expectations for what's in a short-lived branch versus a long-lived branch, and expectations about what goes in different long-lived branches, as soon as you have that, the collaboration problem really kind of falls apart.
Nice. And what about automation?
Automation is another big one. So before automation, before DevOps, to me, DevOps one of the big pillars is automation. And the idea is before we had DevOps and automation, we typically had processes and that would perform manually. For instance, I wouldn't release until I did this set of tests. And for these tests, I would go in and I'd press these buttons and check for these results, all these things. And that was great. And I would try to follow them as a developer. But I can tell you, if it wasn't automated and it was manual, I might skip it, right? I'm a developer. I want to get back into master before my weekend. I don't want to run this big thing. It's a big pain in the butt. I'm not going to do it. I know what happened there. I don't need to run that test. I'm just going to merge back into master. That's the problem with manual tests, right? And I'm a developer, so I can kind of pick on them. Right? So, but with automation, it's not up to the developer to see what tests are run and when. The automation is in place. It's just going to run. They have to just push. The automation is going to run, and it's going to alert them if they cause a problem.
Oh, I get it. So what you're trying to say is with Opsera automation, you can, for example, use tasks to merge from one branch to another, and this is automated. So whatever changes went in from a feature branch went back to your QA or UAT or prod, and these are all automated. Plus, then you have pipelines. When you're changing any code, they can be automatically started and then follow the whole process of building it, testing it, validation of XML, and finally posting it and getting it deployed. Is that
absolutely all of the things, all of the good things that you want if you were a perfect developer, a perfect Salesforce release agent, all the good things that you should do manually, you automate them, and now they're happening all the time. So it's not just the test that I described, but it's the other elements that you described also, and whatever else should be in there. So to your point, in SDLC, you might be doing scans, security scans, then some kind of a build, all of these things that you want to do in SDLC, you can also apply in the Salesforce case.
Awesome. And that's a great point to take home with automation of tasks, automation of pipeline, using security as well. Those are good points. What about testing? Can we add scanners or tests to our pipelines with this Salesforce DevOps?
Definitely, absolutely. So that's paramount, right? It's table stakes right now in SDLC, and the same is true in SFTC. So there are different scanners available, many different scanners available. You want to be able to apply them when commits hit the server and make sure that everything's good. And this is part of shift left, right? Shift left is proven and old, right, in software development or in SDLC, but the same thing applies to Salesforce releasing. If a developer introduces something that doesn't meet the quality expectations or the security expectations, you want to alert them in some convenient place very quickly so they can address it right while it's on the tip of their head.
Nice. And then also you're trying to talk about dependency as well. Like in Opsera, we have a very intuitive UI so that you can work with any, for example, you're making any changes in your custom object or objects and fields, you get included the dependencies through the UI, and then you can select which dependency you want, correct?
Yeah, yes, I brought this up as a challenge because you don't want to handle these things manually. This has a direct analogy with or parallel with software development also. It's kind of like in Git, if you're set up in a repo and you're trying to add files on a per case basis because you don't have your .git ignore set, you can't do a Git at all. If you're set up like that, you're guaranteed to forget something. You changed something 2 days ago, you're trying to go back now, you're going to forget it, it's going to cause a problem, you're going to have to revisit it. Same is true here with dependencies. Whatever tool that you use to set up your Salesforce DevOps, you're going to want to make sure that it can suss out the dependencies for you.
Cool. And then what about rollbacks?
Right, rollback is we should have put this first probably. It's such a big deal. So you're going to have if you say I can never have outages, then the rigor to get back into prod has to be infinite, and your deployment frequency is going to plummet. Right, so you can't. It's unreasonable to say that you're never going to have a problem and you're going to want to have to get back out of it. So the trick is you really want to have a mechanism that you're confident that you can get back to steady state quickly. So for whatever reason, you start to hear that there's a problem with Salesforce, you want to be able to know all the time that you can check something out and get back. You knew you were steady, everything was quiet yesterday, everything was good yesterday. You want to be able to get that back to that steady state very, very quickly. So you definitely want your tool to be able to do that.
Nice. I think you're giving me a really good understanding of Salesforce DevOps here and how with Opsera you can automate everything and you can use automatically include dependencies, which is very difficult otherwise to do it in manual process. And then rollbacks are very crucial and important. And then you also talked about collaboration. What about security? Do you have any understanding of security in this whole process?
Yes, there are some sophisticated security tools out there now. Some of them are baked in with Salesforce, some are separate. You definitely want to include them in your automation in your pipeline so that you're running them often and reporting back to the stakeholders when you find a problem. Sarab, I know you have an interest in that. Can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Yeah, I actually want to talk first say like, do you have any understanding on the current security posture in your source code repos like GitHub? Are you exposing any secrets? And if you don't know, what we can do is we at Opsera, we have Git custodian, which can be used with Opsera's Git custodian. You can stop secrets and sensitive data from leaking out to your source code. And Git custodian can scan secrets, tokens, PIIs, and in your source code and get you GDPR compliance ready. So that's another shift left methodology that can be added to current SDLC as well as Salesforce DevOps. And plus, we have a very good webinar done before, so please go and look at it, and Aditi or Anna can put it in the link here in the chat as well if needed. And then I also want to talk about in the security aspect of the platform. So our platform is SSL TLS 1.3. We use port 443 access only. We are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, and we are based on Kubernetes architecture and ephemeral containers. So all in all, you get a very secure way of using Opsera, and we use HashiCorp Vault, which is industry standard as well. And any other question or thing you want to bring up, Ed, here?
No, I'm actually anxious to see what's in the chat here. Are there any questions in the chat?
Well, here comes me again to help with some audience questions. I hope you guys are ready. Okay, the first one we've got is Salesforce DevOps uses Code Analyzer, PMD, and SonarQube. Can Opsera add that to the pipeline automation?
Yes, and thank you for asking that, Anna. With Opsera, you can automate the whole pipeline where we can add PMD and SonarQube as like Lego blocks in the building blocks for the whole pipeline. And absolutely, it could be added.
Awesome. I'm sure a lot of people have that on their minds. Oh, I use this tool and I use this tool. And with Opsera, it's so easy to integrate that as part of your Salesforce DevOps, as well as your entire SDLC. So I'm sure.
And you bring
it's
that
top
a
of mind.
good point too. Like think about a tool. We sit on top of 100+ tools. So any tool you can think of, we can add it into our tool chain and you can use it either through a REST API or directly adding through as a SaaS platform.
Awesome. All right, then we had one more submission here. Can Opsera provide package validation, testing, and approval stages?
Yeah, definitely we can. So we have no code pipelines. We have a graphical representation of our pipelines with boxes. You can definitely include those elements. It's a little, here's another difference kind of between SDLC and SFDC. Where in SDLC, where you kind of have unit tests that you can run, JUnit or whatever. In SFDC, you have more like a validation step that just kind of does a smoke test. You can definitely include that before you try to move forward with your automation.
Awesome. Well, that covers it for the audience questions, but I wanted to say, thank you so much, you guys. That was really, really informative. I learned a lot. Aditi learned a lot. But I wanted to invite Sarab just to, sort of re-encapsulate what we learned today and for takeaways for the audience before we close out.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Actually, I wanted to show some advantages and conclusion where Salesforce and overall Salesforce DevOps, SDLC, and Opsera as a platform can help all the organizations. So with Opsera, you get a source code driven development. You can use Opsera for both SDLC and Salesforce DevOps use cases. Opsera is the one-stop shop, so you don't have to invest in different orchestration tools. You can save costs for your organization by using Opsera platform. With source-driven development, you get improved collaboration as well. So developers can collaborate like admins and other stakeholders. You're providing a centralized repo to manage the Salesforce metadata like objects, fields, and custom objects. And with that, you also get increased agility and flexibility. With that, you also are getting a better performance, better dependency management. So it's allowing different teams to track those dependencies and components that were being created, and you can do it through a task or a pipeline. And then we can streamline the whole DevOps workflow, like we were talking about pipelines, different scratch orgs that you're using, or you use Sandbox or QA. We can automate and streamline that. We also provide you enhanced visibility and traceability. For example, the changes you were making, you can track them at a granular level and then identify issues and track progress over time. And also you get scalability and performance. With large and medium-sized organizations, you want to be scalable and have a high performance team. So with this, you can reduce your overhead and improve into the development cycle overall.
Awesome.
And then overall, the last point I will make is it's a modern development practice. So with Opsera provides you the latest and greatest delivery with high quality software delivery and faster and better. And we use the methodology of DevOps and agile development. So with that, I can give it over to you, Anna. Any other questions or anything you have?
I like that encapsulation that we talked about, right? Those challenges are evolving away from an outdated way of working, right? Evolving to a more agile, current state of development with your Salesforce DevOps. That's a challenge, but that's something that we solved. Helping with collaboration, right? Don't just put yourself in a box, like Ed said. Don't just put yourself in Ed's corner, right? Take it to your coworkers and really collaborate and get feedback on the things that you're doing. Making sure those dependencies are mapped out and done well, making sure your environments are done well. Like all these things is so fun to hear. And we like to call that the Salesforce DevOps 3.0, right? You've evolved away from 1.0 of that very outdated way of doing things. Evolved away from us only Salesforce DevOps solution or a point solution or a point tool with a black box. And now you're really in a modern development methodology with Opsera. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Correct.
Did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, you brought another point to me. Like you're developing in a culture of continuous improvement and innovation with Salesforce 3.0 at Opsera.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much to Rob and Ed. That was fantastic. So I wanted to say thanks, everybody, for joining us. And then thanks, Aditi, for all the comments and resources in the chat. If you wanted to learn more from these two, from Ed and Sarab, you can always visit us at opsera.io or scan this QR code here and schedule a demo with us. So I'm going to leave this up for about a minute, but I want to say thanks, everybody, for joining us. And if you have any questions or want to know anything else, feel free to respond to the email that we will send you as a follow-up to this webinar. So join us for the next DevOps Huddle if you're curious about in-depth information about DevOps, not just Salesforce DevOps. But thanks so much, Sarab and Ed and Aditi.